The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. We're getting closer and closer to that day on which we celebrate America's independence and all of that stuff. It's called the 4th of July, and I don't know, it's just a day for barbecues for me. I don't get super patriotic on that day, Pat. I mean, I'm not even American, but it's still a fun day to hang out with friends and to do some grilling of all sorts of things, vegan and otherwise.
Yeah, aren't you on the record saying that you're not even a fan of fireworks? Like, that's pretty anti-American, if I do say so myself.
Fireworks are absolutely disgusting and despicable, and I think that they are destroying the fabric and coarsening the culture of our nation completely. And they're also just really, really annoying. But in any case, Donald Trump is making a big deal out of the 4th of July. There's going to be a big salute to America on the National Mall, and the plans have now been released, and there's going to be music. There will be military demonstrations and flyovers, which, you know, the flyover by itself is a common fixture at sporting events, and I don't like it. Like, it's too militaristic for me. The idea of combining a sporting event with, such a brazen display of the military, the fruits of the military-industrial complex. The flyover I already sort of don't like, but military demonstrations in Washington, D.C., for me are just the calling cards of authoritarians.
Wow, we couldn't disagree more so far. I love flyovers. They give me the chills. I love anticipating them, and then it's over before you know it. I get this cool feeling when I see a flyover, but I feel like if I lived around a sporting arena and I didn't know that they were going to do a flyover that day, and I was just hanging out in my apartment and I heard the planes fly overhead, I would be absolutely terrified because I would think that there was a nuclear bomb coming to get me.
Yeah, well, we disagree on that. I don't like the flyovers, but then some of the other things that will be taking place at Donald Trump's 4th of July event will include marching bands, a drum corps, floats, military units, giant balloons, equestrian drill teams. There will be flag-waving groups. You will also see Donald Trump lead a celebration of America with music and a military demonstration and flyover. There will also be a spectacular fireworks display over the National Mall, and those fireworks will be launched from right behind the Lincoln Memorial, which will be an extraordinarily stunning visual. And, of course, this is all being taken advantage of by Donald Trump in conjunction with the launch of his reelection campaign. And I mean, listen, I have such a negative reaction to this stuff. I don't know exactly what it is. It's not an anti-American sentiment. It's just the kind of constant politicizing of and glorification of elements of our society that I just don't think should be glorified for political gain.
Yeah, and I think Donald Trump was inspired to do this when he went to France a couple summers ago. He witnessed their Bastille Day celebrations that went on for hours and hours. And I think if we had celebrations here that went on for hours and hours, I would certainly get bored. But apparently Trump was not bored.
Yeah, and
he
these
wanted
will
to do
go
one
on
of his
for
own
hours
back
and hours.
home. Yeah, hours and hours and hours. And of course, who benefits from this? Trump, because he's launching his reelection bid. Also because the guy has a hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, and that hotel is already sold out for the entire 4th of July weekend, which, of course, benefits Trump. He's going to be profiting off of the celebration.
Delightful. Well, Trump's profiting from almost everything that he does in this presidency, and that we shouldn't expect that to be any different with this. So on the 4th of July, I'm canceling the 4th of July David Pakman Show break right now. We are going to do shows the entire 4th of July break in order to take attention away from these celebrations.
Okay, I'll cancel my plans then. That's fine.
Please, by all means, cancel them immediately. No, we are going to be off for like 6 months just in celebration of the 4th of July. No, I'm kidding. We'll just take a couple days off as we always do, and it'll combine with the weekend, and it'll be like a very lovely 4 or 5 day weekend. Okay, surgeons are often considered within the medical world as sort of the mechanics. They are not known for their bedside manner. They are known for the physical skill of performing the types of surgeries that they perform. And often they are not necessarily the easiest to get along with, even for their coworkers, which could be operating room staff or nurses or others. And there's a new study published this week in the JAMA Surgery Journal, which says that when the interactions between surgeons and their teams are unprofessional or abrasive or whatever, that there end up being more complications after surgery. And this is like completely obvious if you've read, there's a really great book called The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, who's a surgeon. I believe he is an endocrinology, a surgical endocrinology oncologist, or oncology endocrinology, basically endocrinology cancers in the Boston area. And if you've read that book, you would immediately understand that something like an abrasive surgeon running operations would affect the people around the surgeon and would lead to worse health outcomes for the patient. And now we actually have a study confirming that, but completely unsurprising, Pat.
Yeah, so an example of something like that happening would be a nurse makes a recommendation that maybe is a bad recommendation, for example, and the surgeon yells at her.
Yes.
Now the nurse is less likely to give a recommendation in the future, and maybe in the future she would have some great recommendation, something important to the patient that she just keeps to herself because she doesn't want to get yelled at again, and so that leads to complications down the road. I feel like with this study, maybe like the methodology isn't quite the best because you're dealing with employees reporting and kind of telling on the surgeons, right? But I think it's the best that we can do, and it looks like they were actually able to glean some concrete results from it. Like over a 36-month period after a surgery, patients were 12 to 14% more likely to experience complications if they had an abrasive surgeon, and that included things like infections, pneumonia, stroke, and kidney failure. So this is all serious business. You know, it's not just purely the surgeon's ability to perform a procedure. It's also how they act with the people around them.
It's interesting that when you talked about a nurse, you said she.
Yeah, I know. I picked up on that too.
I mean, listen, this is when we talk about in the discussion about the gender pay gap, one of the examples that's often cited is surgeons are more likely to be men, and nurses are more likely to be women. And there are obviously arguments that are based on that some are good arguments, some are bad arguments. But that's actually something that often comes up in the discussion about the gender pay gap.
Well, it's weird though. Like, should I go out of my way to say that the surgeon is female and that the nurse is male? Just
Yes.
because?
No,
I mean, that is less likely to happen, but certainly that's a paradigm that can happen. And so, should I police my language in that sense a little bit more?
I don't think you need to say he or she in either case, right? You could say the surgeon and the nurse.
I had another slip up actually recently, talking to a friend of mine who is half Puerto Rican, and I asked when her grandparents immigrated here.
Oh, no.
And that was bad, of course, because Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. But for whatever reason, just thinking through that during that conversation, I didn't recognize that Puerto Rico was part of the United States. So immigrate is, of course, not the right word. So I think I'm going to just like sit in a hole for a little while, get woke, study up on some things, and then I'll come back on the bonus show next week more prepared.
Someone was mad about, there was something you said, when was it that we did the story?
This is totally derailed.
When was it that we did the story about the password security and facial recognition? Somebody wrote to me.
That was a couple days ago.
Yeah, somebody wrote to me. I didn't remember if it was the last Friday or Monday. Somebody wrote to me and said, yeah, I was cringing when Pat was talking about Apple did facial recognition and then canceled it or something like that. And I didn't even really understand what it was that they were mad about, but they didn't like something about what you said.
Yeah, I saw the Reddit post about that too. Someone said that we sounded very misinformed, which could have totally been true, but they didn't clarify exactly what we were wrong about.
Yeah,
so I was
I
just
noticed
kind of
that.
left confused and not knowing how to improve myself.
I was equally confused, and I would like more feedback about that. One of the Sandy Hook victims' fathers has won a defamation suit against Alex Jones, who has now been sanctioned. I'm talking about Leonard Posner, whose 6-year-old son was killed at the Sandy Hook massacre. And he's been fighting conspiracy theorists, including Alex Jones, for a long time. And he finally scored a win this week against deniers who have been saying that the entire thing never happened. And a Wisconsin judge issued a summary judgment in his favor in a defamation lawsuit against the authors of a book called Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, which is a book that has all sorts of false claims, claiming that the entire shooting was a FEMA drill. It was all a pretext to justify the confiscation of guns, that there were crisis actors and all sorts of other stuff. And the lawsuit was very narrowly focused in on the claim by James Fetzer and Mike Palachuk that Posner had forged or faked the death certificate of his kid, though it also alluded to other conspiracy theories. And the court documents say that the authors acted with malice, that they knowingly published statements that they knew to be false, or that at least had reckless disregard for whether they were true or false. And ultimately, this is a win for reason and reality. And this is also connected to a whole bunch of other issues related to this, including motions to sanction Alex Jones, because there's a separate defamation lawsuit against Alex Jones, also a defamation lawsuit along the same lines. And a Connecticut judge has sanctioned Alex Jones for what she called a despicable tirade against the attorney representing the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting. We talked about this earlier this week. Jones launched into this swear-laced tirade claiming that child porn had been planted on InfoWars servers and all sorts of unsubstantiated allegations. And now he has been sanctioned. So I think that this is good news, right, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I hope something like this doesn't happen again, where we have a terrible incident, a mass shooting. Of course, I don't want that alone to happen, but for then later on people to make up bogus conspiracy theories about it that really do impact the victims of the tragedy and the family members of the victims of the tragedy. So I hope that this is an example and something that stops it from happening in the future. Funny enough, Alex Jones's excuse, his legal argument with all this stuff, is that he was experiencing a form of psychosis
right
shortly after the Sandy Hook shooting.
A fugue state.
And and that he thought that everything was staged. And I can't believe that people are still listening to Alex Jones when he's coming out there and saying that. Like, the guy's saying that he was psychotic, and somehow his viewers are able to put that behind him. Maybe that they think that he's no longer experiencing psychosis. Maybe they just like him anyway.
That would be that he's saying things that are equally ridiculous now. I mean, again, he's saying that there was porn planted possibly by the attorney who's involved with the suit against him, that they may have planted child porn on his computer. He's saying, when I said things that are completely not based in reality a few years ago, I was in some kind of psychotic fugue state. But now he's saying things that are equally baseless. But are we supposed to believe that he's no longer in that fugue state?
Yeah, and then also a couple years back when Jones was dealing with the child custody lawsuit, I think his lawyers argued that he was just playing a character on his show. So if you're an avid Alex Jones viewer, you have to deal with those things. You have to deal with the fact that he's either psychotic or he's playing a character. Whatever the reason is, I think there's plenty of justification to provide that he's not actually his genuine self, or at least that he's just way over-exaggerating for the purposes of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the character thing, there is actually a serious discussion to be had there. Like, for example, on the David Pakman Show, this is basically a show where I just give my genuine opinion about politics, and the things I say on the show are real. When I tell a story about something that happened to me, it's a real story. When I give my opinion about what I think someone should or shouldn't do, that's really how I feel. And if it were to become a court transcript of sorts, those truly would be my feelings and views about things. At the same time, for example, with the Sam Cedar set controversy and lawsuits and all of this stuff, it's all fake. Like, we're both pretending that we're really mad at each other and that there's legal action and all this stuff. If that was presented in some kind of court thing, I would rightly say that is a character, in the sense that none of that is real. It's all theater, and most of the audience gets it, but not everybody.
Yeah, it's weird how not everyone gets it. I wish everyone could just understand your humor there, but unfortunately they don't.
Yes.
Yeah, but like, Jones isn't known to play a character within a character and to be just totally joking around with stuff during his show. He like gives this idea that he's always being serious and believing everything that he says. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I play different characters on this show or the bonus show. Like, I've been known to be bushy-tailed, wide-eyed Pat. I've also been devil's advocate Pat, right?
You've been beat a guy up on the subway, Pat?
Yeah, and my whole thing is, if it later comes out that I said something completely stupid or deplorable, then I was just playing a character, then I was just joking around. Yeah. But if I'm giving eloquent, informed points, then that's me. That's the actual version of me.
Yeah, earlier this week, you were playing a character. You were playing a producer who doesn't know anything about facial recognition.
Yeah, and earlier in this bonus show, I was actually playing a producer who is not so woke on the sort of pronouns that you're supposed to use when talking about certain professions.
Yes.
And maybe if people don't want me to play that character again, I'll stop doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of disagreement about which version of Producer Pat people like the most. But I think in either case, you've never claimed that any of these characters were in any way related to a psychotic or fugue state.
No, and I think that's our next poll question. Which version of Producer Pat do you like the best?
And what topic will Pat eventually go so far off the rails on that he will claim he was in some kind of fugue state, reminiscent of that really great episode in Breaking Bad, of course. I don't know what it would take for you to do that.
I mean, I'm always willing to issue an apology. I'm always Okay, one more time.
This is really working Pat up into a lather.
This is really working for me here. I'm always willing to issue an apology to those whom I have offended.
Yes. And that is a very, very large list of people. So we will get started on those apologies. Submit your name if you demand an apology from Producer Pat. That does it for today. New show, new bonus show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.